The arrival of the human delegation at Station Vraxis was met with the usual mixture of wariness and curiosity. For the most part, humans had proven themselves adaptable, resilient, and most perplexingly, overly friendly. Captain Xyler of the Vree Dominion observed their docking with a careful, multifaceted gaze, his compound eyes processing their every movement. Beside him, Dr. Threx of the Zelter Clade clutched his data tablet, the feathers along his neck bristling in quiet unease. "They are too casual," Threx muttered, his beak clicking in mild irritation. "No other species disembarks like that." Xyler followed his companion's gaze. The human crew emerged from their sleek, dark-hulled ship with an energy that defied the sterile, metallic stillness of the station. Their leader, a broad-shouldered male identified as Commander Holt, strode forward with the unhurried confidence that made his species so unpredictable. Behind him, his officers chattered among themselves, unbothered by the various alien species lingering in the docking bay. Then the truly bizarre event occurred. As they passed one of the security checkpoints, a towering, quadrupedal sentry beast lifted its head. The creature, a Drellic, was bred for station security, massive, six-eyed, and covered in a thick, bristling hide that secreted a mild neurotoxin. Most species wisely avoided proximity. Holt did the opposite. With a grin, he strode toward the beast and extended a gloved hand. Xyler felt his mandibles tighten. This was foolishness, recklessness. The Drellic's tendrils flared in warning, its breath releasing a faint mist of chemical deterrence. Any sane creature would back away. Holt did not. Instead, he crouched, made an odd series of clicking sounds, and before Xyler could formulate a proper response, he ran his fingers along the Drellic's armored skull, The docking bay fell into stunned silence. The guards stiffened, uncertain whether to intervene. The creature, initially rigid, let out a deep, guttural rumble. It was purring. Xyler's mandibles parted in sheer disbelief. The Drellic, a species known for its aggressive territorial behavior, was leaning into the human's touch. Holt, completely at ease, continued rubbing along its jawline, muttering nonsense in his strange, guttural tongue. Threx made a strangled noise, half squawk, half gasp. "That is a security-grade Drellic. It is only trained to recognize handlers. He should be missing an arm right now." "Clearly he is not," Xyler muttered, unable to tear his gaze away. Holt finally withdrew his hand and gave the beast a final scratch behind one of its ridged ears. With one last pleased growl, the Drellic lowered its head and resumed its post. Holt, meanwhile, turned back to his team with a casual chuckle. "Big guys just misunderstood," he said, and the other humans grinned as if this were perfectly normal. Xyler turned to Threx. "That was not normal." "No," Threx agreed, still gripping his data tablet like a lifeline. "No, it most certainly was not." By the time the human delegation reached the station's central hall, whispers had already begun to circulate. Humans were bold, yes, but this was something else. The next incident occurred in the research wing, where a Zelter biologist had been tending to a caged specimen of a Florin, a multi-tentacled aquatic creature known for its unpredictable moods. Holt had paused mid-conversation upon spotting it, eyes lighting up as though he had discovered an old friend. Before the scientist could protest, Holt approached the tank, pressed his hand against the containment glass, and spoke in an absurdly gentle tone. The Florin, known for its tendency to lash out at unfamiliar beings, drifted closer. It hesitated, tentacles curling in wary consideration. Then, to everyone's shock, it mimicked his movement, pressing one delicate appendage against the glass where his hand rested. The room erupted in a flurry of activity. Scientists rushed to recalibrate their instruments, biomonitors flickering with heightened activity. The Florin was calm, more so than it had ever been under observation. Holt turned, oblivious to the chaos he had just caused. "He's kind of cute," he remarked before moving on. Xyler's exoskeleton itched with something he could not name. He had studied human behavioral patterns. They formed social bonds, much like many sentient species, but their range of acceptable interactions was illogically vast. They treated all manner of creatures as if they were kin. Predators, herbivores, species known for their lethal aggression. None were exempt from this bizarre compulsion. And it wasn't just Holt. As the day progressed, reports filtered in from across the station. Another human had been seen absent-mindedly, stroking the spines of a Zrax delegate. Spines meant to deter unwanted touch. The Zrax had not retaliated. Instead, it had gone into a strange, trance-like state. A third human had been caught cradling a Velran hatchling. A species known to bite fingers clean off when handled improperly. Zyler gathered with Threx and a few other officers in a secured observation chamber, reviewing footage from the day's events. The room was filled with an air of mounting unease. Dr. Threx finally spoke, voice edged with something between fascination and alarm. I have analyzed multiple neurological scans taken from the Florin incident. There was a clear reduction in stress markers. Not just in the creature, but in the human as well. Zyler exhaled slowly. Are you suggesting this is a mutual biological response? I'm saying that humans might be the only known species that engages in cross-species social bonding as a fundamental behavior. The implications were unsettling. Every species had boundaries. Even among close allies, physical contact remained largely ceremonial or restricted to familiar groups. Yet humans lacked this restraint. They extended this instinct to everything, to creatures they had just met, to those deemed untouchable or dangerous. It was not dominance. It was not a show of force. It was something else entirely. One of the officers, a hulking Shar warrior, let out a rumbling breath. And what happens when other species start responding in kind? We are not built for such interactions. What if? He was cut off by the sound of a soft chittering. All heads turned. Zyler stiffened as he realized the sound was coming from the floor beside him. One of the station's maintenance drones, a small, spider-like construct, had scuttled closer to where a human officer was seated. The human, seemingly unaware of the tension in the room, was absent-mindedly scratching the top of the drone's metallic frame. It leaned into the touch. Silence filled the chamber. Threx made a small, distressed noise. Even the machines aren't immune? Zyler felt something akin to resignation settle over him. We need to study this. Immediately. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The galaxy had long regarded humans as peculiar, but manageable. Now, for the first time, he wondered if they had underestimated them entirely. Because if this ability could not be explained, if it could not be controlled, then the humans were not just another species in the cosmos. They were something far more disruptive, and the galaxy had no idea what to do with them. Dr. Threx had never felt this unmoored. His scientific career had been built on the pursuit of order, on the meticulous documentation of predictable biological patterns. And yet, nothing about the humans was predictable. He stood at the center of Lab Chamber 6, surrounded by an assortment of scanning devices, medical monitors, and an increasingly uneasy collection of alien observers. The experiment was simple in design, but its implications could be profound. The subject, a Florin, the same tentacled creature that had responded so strangely to Commander Holt, floated in a containment tank, its bioluminescent tendrils curling and uncurling in slow, rhythmic movements. Across from it, a chosen representative from the station's non-human residents stood rigid, watching the tank with something between suspicion and quiet dread. Captain Zyler observed from the side, his angular exoskeleton shifting as he spoke. Explain the parameters once more. Dr. Threx exhaled, adjusting the tablet in his claws. We have established that humans experience a mutual calming effect when engaging in tactile interaction with other life forms. What we do not know is whether this effect is exclusive to them, or if other species are simply unaware of their own ability to engage in such behavior. His feathers ruffled slightly as he cast a skeptical glance toward Holt. We are attempting to determine if physical interaction with the Florin produces a measurable response in non-human subjects. Holt grinned, arms crossed. In other words, you want to see if anyone else here is capable of petting something without freaking out? Threx's feathers twitched in irritation. That is not the term I would use. The assembled aliens remained unconvinced. The Shard delegate let out a low hiss, his reptilian tail curling against the floor. Florins are notoriously erratic. They respond only to handlers they recognize. Then we will proceed cautiously, Threx assured him before turning toward the Vree warrior standing at the designated interaction zone. The chosen volunteer, HFY, stood stiffly, his mandibles twitching in unease. His exoskeleton gleamed under the lab's lighting, sharp and unyielding, a soldier unaccustomed to softness. Holt clapped his hands together. "All right, HFY, step up and give it a go." HFY shot him a murderous look, but obeyed. He extended one segmented arm, claws hesitating mere inches from the Florin's undulating tendrils. The creature slowed its movements, sensing the unfamiliar presence. A long silence stretched. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then HFY made contact. The Florin shrank back instantly, its body contracting into a defensive coil. The warrior retracted his hand, as if burned. The monitors flickered wildly, registering an immediate spike in stress responses. "Well," Xyler muttered, "that answers one question." "It does not make sense," Threx said, scanning the data. HFY's approach was not aggressive. The Florin simply did not. His words halted as the human officer beside him stepped forward without hesitation. Before anyone could stop him, Holt reached into the tank, allowing his fingers to brush against the Florin's nearest appendage. The creature uncoiled at once, its tendrils pressing eagerly into his touch. The data screens reversed immediately. Stress markers plummeted, replaced with stable readings that mirrored Holt's own heart rate. HFY stared in disbelief. "It trusts him?" Threx felt a sinking sensation in his gut. It wasn't just trust. The readings suggested something deeper, something instinctive and involuntary. The Florin hadn't just tolerated Holt's touch, it had sought it out. Xyler finally spoke, voice unreadable. "This is no coincidence." The rest of the experiment unraveled quickly. One by one, more aliens attempted contact with different test subjects, ranging from station-bred creatures to semi-domesticated fauna. Every attempt failed. The animals recoiled, agitated and uncomfortable. But the moment a human intervened, the response shifted. Fear dissipated, aggression dulled. By the end of the session, the conclusion was undeniable. It was not just that humans could pet anything. It was that only humans could. The station fell into quiet chaos over the next few days. What had begun as a simple scientific curiosity became an uncontainable phenomenon across Vraxis, for various species sought to test the theory themselves. Some attempts were less than successful. One particularly ambitious Yarn delegate had tried to bond with a venomous Kirith sandbeast and had to be rushed to medical containment. Others found the revelation unsettling. Threx observed an increasing number of alien personnel keeping careful distance from human crewmates. Even those who had once been indifferent now regarded them with wary curiosity, as if their presence alone could unravel something fundamental about interspecies interaction. More disturbingly, some leaned into the phenomenon entirely. Reports trickled in of diplomatic envoys requesting human delegates not for negotiation, but for their presence alone. Trade agreements that had once taken weeks were now concluded over a single encounter, where a human diplomat simply sat beside a tense negotiation table, offering the occasional reassuring pat on an anxious delegate's shoulder. Even the station's own inhabitants were struggling to maintain protocol. One evening, Threx walked into the security wing to find Xyler standing stiffly beside a human officer while a Velran hatchling gnawed harmlessly at the human's sleeve. Xyler, normally composed, looked vaguely haunted. Threx arched a brow. "Captain?" Xyler exhaled slowly. "They do not merely bond with creatures, Threx. They alter behavior. I have seen hardened warriors seek them out after particularly stressful encounters." He gestured toward the officer, who was now absent-mindedly rubbing at the hatchling's back while reviewing station reports. The tiny creature let out a pleased chirrup, its sharp talons no longer twitching in habitual aggression. Threx was no longer sure if he should be fascinated or horrified. "And you? Have you?" Xyler bristled. "I am a captain of the Vree Dominion." A pause. Then, quieter, "And no, I have not." The admission was almost convincing. Almost. But Threx had seen the way Xylar's claws flexed slightly, as if resisting an impulse he could not name. Across the station, the phenomenon escalated. Shar merchants began offering live fauna in trade agreements under the condition that human negotiators be present. Zelter diplomats, once rigid in their formalities, allowed human envoys to place a steadying hand on their shoulders during tense deliberations. Even the security beasts had changed. The once distant Drellics now patrolled with less agitation when stationed near human officers. It was not just cultural, it was universal, and that was what terrified Threx the most. Late one night, as he pored over data reports, he found himself considering something deeply unsettling. Had this ability always existed? If so, why had no other species ever exhibited it? Why were humans the exception? His feathers ruffled as he shut down the monitors. The answers, whatever they were, would have consequences far beyond the station. For the first time in his career, Threx felt he was studying something that had no clear end, something that could change everything. The summit chamber of Vraxis had never felt so stifling. Representatives from over a dozen species sat in uneasy silence. The vast room filled with the subtle tension of unreadable expressions and shifting postures. At the center of it all, Dr. Threx stood beside Captain Xylar, his feathers ruffled in barely contained anxiety. The purpose of the meeting was clear. What should be done about the humans? For days, debates had raged across the station, and no consensus had been reached. The evidence was undeniable. Humans possessed an ability no other species did, an instinctive biological capacity to form connections across genetic and cultural barriers. It was not persuasion, nor manipulation. It was something primal, undeniable, and utterly unprecedented. Some species saw opportunity. Others saw threat. Xylar exhaled slowly, his mandibles tightening. "This meeting will begin now," he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "The matter before us is not merely scientific. It is diplomatic, economic, and potentially existential. We must determine how to proceed." A murmur swept through the assembly. A Zelter dignitary, his feathered crest quivering, leaned forward. "We have reports of entire delegations adjusting their policies due to human presence alone. This is not normal diplomacy." Across the room, the Shar ambassador, a massive reptilian figure, let out a heavy exhale. "They make apex predators docile. I've seen it with my own eyes. Even our own warriors, our most hardened elite, are affected." His tail twitched, betraying his unease. One of the Velran speakers let out a clicking sound. "And what happens when this extends beyond simple negotiation? What if governments begin demanding human involvement in matters of control? What if warfare itself is influenced by their mere presence?" Threx listened, his claws gripping his data tablet. The fear in the room was palpable. And yet, none of it surprised him. Holt sat beside him, listening quietly. The human had said little since the summit began, his expression unreadable. Only when an Elith senator, a species known for their calculating, near-predatory intellect, spoke did he finally shift. "This is not merely an anomaly," the senator said. "This is a disruption of natural order. If left unchecked, we may reach a point where governance itself is fundamentally altered, not by war, not by conquest, but by simple proximity." Threx saw the muscles in Holt's jaw tighten. Before the discussion could spiral further, Xylar raised a clawed hand. "There is another factor we must consider. If we, as a collective, react to this phenomenon with fear, what does that mean for our relationship with humans? Will we attempt to control it? Restrict it? What precedent does that set?" A silence followed. That was the question, wasn't it? It was not just about humans. It was about what the galaxy would do with them. Threx cleared his throat, drawing reluctant attention. From a scientific perspective, he began carefully. This ability, whatever its origins, does not appear to be something humans control. It is not a technique. It is not a skill. It is biological. To treat it as anything else is to misunderstand its nature. The Zelter dignitary let out a dry hiss. "And what if this ability can be replicated? Exploited?" The word sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Holt finally spoke. I've been sitting here listening to all of you talk about my people like we're some kind of force to be contained, like we're a variable in some grand equation you need to solve. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Has it ever crossed your minds that maybe we don't want to be your galactic mascots? Silence. The Velran speaker twitched. It is not a matter of... Yes, it is. Holt cut in. You're scared because you don't understand it. And when people don't understand something, they try to control it. So tell me, what exactly do you plan to do with us? Zyler watched the way the other delegates tensed, their discomfort manifesting in minute gestures. No one had an answer. That was the problem. The galaxy had always assumed humans were adaptable, that they were persistent, resourceful, and occasionally reckless, but now, they were something else entirely. They weren't just surviving in the galactic ecosystem, they were changing it. And nothing terrified the other species more than that. The Shar ambassador spoke at last, his tone slow, measured. If this ability is inherent, then humans are not simply another species in our collective order. They are something new. His reptilian gaze fixed on Holt. And the galaxy does not react well to things it cannot classify. A heavy truth settled over the chamber. Threx saw Holt's expression shift, something flickering behind his eyes. He was a soldier, yes, but more than that, he was human. He had grown up in a world where connection was second nature, where bonds were formed not through treaties or shared genetic markers, but through instinct and trust. And now, the rest of the galaxy was struggling to keep up. Zyler finally spoke. I propose that no policy be enacted to restrict human interaction. To attempt to regulate what is clearly biological is both unethical and untenable. His gaze swept across the gathered representatives. However, we cannot ignore the impact this will have. It is not humans we must control. It is our own response to them. The words hung in the air. Slowly, one by one, the delegates nodded. The decision was made. As the summit concluded and the representatives filed out, Holt remained seated, staring at the polished surface of the table. Threx hesitated before speaking. You expected worse? Holt chuckled dryly. I expected someone to suggest quarantining us on a distant moon. Zyler's mandibles twitched in what could almost be amusement. The thought did cross a few minds. Holt exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You know what the crazy part is? Back home, we don't even think about it. We pet dogs, cats, whatever's around. We don't ask why, we just do it. Threx tilted his head, considering. Perhaps that is precisely why no one else has ever developed this instinct. They never needed to. Holt glanced at him, brow raised. Threx continued, his voice quieter now. Most species evolved in rigid social structures, hierarchies, boundaries. Even those who form bonds do so within strict limitations. But humans? His feathers shifted in something almost like admiration. You have no such limits. Zyler folded his arms. And that, Commander, is why you are dangerous. Holt grinned. Yeah? Tell that to the Drellic in the docking bay. Pretty sure he'd fight someone for me at this point. Zyler let out something between a sigh and a resigned click. That is precisely the problem. Threx watched them both, his mind already racing through the implications. The humans had not changed themselves to fit into the galaxy. The galaxy was changing to fit around them, and nothing would ever be the same again.